Yeah, thanks everybody for introducing yourselves. And sounds like everybody here is a very kind of curious person and kind of a adventurer or journeyer through life and learning, especially around, your own self, your own mind. So that's very cool. I feel very at home with the audience. So yeah, I mean, I mean, I can say a little bit more about me and like what I'm creating right now. So my background, I spent my career just working in tech companies like Microsoft, Amazon. I ran product management at a music streaming startup called RDO before, which was founded by Giannis Fries, who had started Skype and Kazaa. We were sold to a music streaming service called Pandora. And then after that, I was fifth employee and VP of product at a AI chatbot startup called Mezi. And basically, we had accomplished the task of making an AI chatbot that was not distinguishable to the end user, that, whether it was talking to a human or a machine, to the point where, they would call us their best friend. They would send us pictures of their dogs and things like that. And that's how real it felt. We sold to American Express after 2 years for 130 million. And, in parallel, about 7 years ago, I started working on myself. I was in my late 20s. I had about 40 engineers under me at Amazon, and I was a total stress ball, right? I was your standard, very competitive, very type A, very aggressive, very like go, go, go. And like, I don't care about your feelings. I don't care about my feelings, like all that kind of thing. And I ended up with a ton of anxiety. And this was a little bit before, meditation got a bit more mainstream. And so I struggled really hard trying to meditate. It took me maybe a year and a half before I got into that habit. And, I was meditating for hours a day for several months in a row, and 10-day silent meditation. My whole world became all about esoteric spiritual things, everything from, Buddhism to like, was paying various teachers, going to retreats, going to workshops. It just was my whole life. And then about 4 years ago, I tried coaching for the first time. And that was an amazing experience because I realized how mainstream it could be, right? Like a lot of people don't meditate because it's hard, right? It is so big a leap from what your average person does. It's sit down, don't do anything you want to do right now. In fact, don't even think what you want to think right now. So it's a setup for most people to feel like they're doing it wrong, right? Because they'll sit down, good intentions, close their eyes, and then they're just hearing their mind going, right? And they spend like half an hour planning out their whole day, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, I'm bad at this. I don't want to do this anymore. It's the equivalent of playing a video game, and level one is so hard that you're like, all right, this is clearly not for me. This is somebody else. You drop out, right? And so that's what personal growth looks like today. It's either, meditation, which is really hard, right? Or it's something really, really expensive like coaching, which could be amazing, but, you're paying for somebody's one-on-one time. Or it's like you read a book, and, I read books too, but we all know that, when we consume information, it's a leaky bucket, right? You might read a book, but how much of it will you really retain 2 weeks later? You read a book about confidence. Do you really think that you're going to be more confident by the end? Right? Or you listen to something in a podcast, you're like, oh yeah, that's a good point. You might even have the motivation to write it down somewhere. Oh, you write it down on a note, and then you never look at it again, right? So the unfortunate thing, right? Maybe it's okay if you're learning a piece of information, you're learning a statistic, you're reading the news, but when it comes to personal growth, these are all about habit change, right? Changing long-standing mindsets, changing long-standing behaviors, right? It's almost like the Grand Canyon was formed because, water flowed through it for thousands, maybe millions of years, right? So our minds are the same way. We've practiced it into these very well-worn paths. And the only way to get out of that path is to wear something else in another direction, right? So all of these like one shots, right? they don't necessarily sustain. And so human was created as the answer to that, right? So what we are building is a new process for sustainable change, right? We are giving the benefits of coaching, right? Steve Jobs had a coach, right? Founders of, the founder of Salesforce, the founder of Slack, they have coaches. Your average person will never experience that. So we found a way to democratize coaching, right? By putting it into a mobile app, giving people bite-sized content, and then giving a lot of reinforcement so that change can actually happen, right? And so we've done a number of tests. It's been very effective. It's actually even more higher efficacy than traditional coaching, right? So in 14 days, we can give you the result that you would get with traditional coaching. And yeah, we just raised some money, very thankful for that, and now are looking forward to shipping something into the world. I could keep talking, but
it's so interesting. Yeah. Please keep on sharing. This is
yeah. What do you want to know?
And also, I'm keeping it up to everyone who wants to ask a question. And
let's make it more interactive, because I could talk at you, but I want to know what's of interest.
I have a question. How did you start meditating? I mean, I started once meditating, but it's really hard for me to keep on track. So how did you keep on track, and for how long are you meditating now?
Well, first of all, you should probably just use my app instead, because it's way easier. A lot of people think they're bad at meditation. Nobody's bad at talking to a coach. But for me, the journey was, honestly, I have to say it's partially luck, right? Like, so living in Northern California, where there's a bunch of hippies, a lot of spirituality, a lot of innovation, around that realm. One of my best friends got really into meditation. At the time, for me, just being this competitive, aggressive person, I was like, what does he know that I don't know? Right. So I chased him down competitively, down the meditation rabbit hole. So it's kind of almost opposite of how a person is supposed to go into meditation. So, being surrounded by people, I think, who are interested in the same thing is a really important thing, right? You don't have community, then you're just, it's an uphill battle. The second thing is, I am an achiever type personality, right? Meaning, the way we do one thing is the way we do everything, right? Like, some people are like, oh, I'm really nice to all my friends, but I'm a jerk to all my coworkers. No, not possible. We're not that clever, right? So when it comes to, something that I set a goal on, I spent my entire upbringing playing a lot of sports, right? And at work, I was always very aggressive, and so when it came to meditation, I was just as aggressive, right? And then I would say a third factor, and so if you're struggling with, like, kind of persisting, actually, let me ask you, like, what do you kind of, what's your experience of trying to meditate? What is that like? And I'm sure, by the way, how many people in this room can relate to, not really being able to keep up a meditation habit? How many people? There you go. Okay. Very good company, right? Another reason why everybody should use my app. But okay, so let's hear about it. What is it like when you sit down? Is it you can't get your mind to stop thinking? You don't want to make the time for it? You feel guilty about it? What is it like for you?
I wanted to do it in the morning to get my head clear of everything, to start the day right. But my bad habit is that I always grab my phone and start looking at Instagram or Snapchat or something like this. And then I feel like it's too late, just go for breakfast or do some stuff for school, but I just quit meditating and don't do it, and that's my problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and here's where it's interesting, right? I'm also a trained coach. So when you look, right, and there's something you want to do, you want to put a magnifying glass on, okay, you're lying in bed and you know you could meditate right now. You also know you could check social media. What happens for you in that moment where you can choose this way or that way?
I think to myself, I don't know, it's just a habit. You stand up, it's automatically happening. So
Yeah. Is it automatic though?
probably not. I
Right.
mean,
I think the question is, right, and I don't say this in a judgmental way at all. This is for everyone, including myself. How much do you value your time, and how much do you value yourself? You know. So here's the thing. Oftentimes, right, you could be in theory, a very responsible person, right? Like, I'm guessing you're a student. You know how to. You said you were a student, right? Yeah. So you know how to like follow a path, you know how to achieve, right? We know how to get things done. I'm pretty sure everybody here, I mean, is highly motivated. Who else would spend, a time doing a virtual conference on this kind of topic if you weren't, right? So you already are. So the question is, how come you achieve in certain places and not others? And so for many of us, it's very, very easy for us to achieve when other people are involved, right? Like, oh, if there's a meeting, I'm not just going to be like, no, never mind. I'm just going to look at Instagram instead. Right. Or if you're meeting somebody, you're not going to be like, never mind. I'll just lie in bed instead. So when it comes to our obligations to other people, we oftentimes do it. Why? Because we want to look good. We're scared of disappointing somebody else. It's not actually because we're disciplined. It's not actually because we're motivated or we have values. We're fundamentally scared of somebody else not liking us, right? So when it comes to our own things, right? Like, I think the question is, what would your context have to be? Because it's not about looking good for anybody. Nobody would ever see whether you meditated that morning or not. The question is, like, what context can you create for yourself, right? That would make it worth it. Because I'm guessing it's not particularly intentional for you right now. It just kind of happens, doesn't matter. So I guess let me ask, like, what benefit would you have from actually meditating? Why does it matter?
I think that I'm more balanced in the morning. I'm not that bad tempered.
And why does that matter?
I think that has an influence on my family and my friends.
Yeah. It sounds like it's pretty important, something you've thought about a lot. Okay. All right. And what is the impact of not meditating? And by the way, I'm going to say this. Oftentimes, we say we want something, right? And then we don't do it and we're like, that's okay. There's always tomorrow, right? But oftentimes we don't realize what the cost is, right? Because when we look at the cost of meditating, who wants to meditate in the morning? I don't feel like meditating, right? Who wants to actually do that? We think the cost is, I don't get to check social media. But there's actually another cost that we usually aren't fully aware of, right? So what actually is the cost of not meditating?
Good question. I really don't know.
Yeah.
I think that I'm really bad tempered, and that my family's like, why are you so aggressive, and doesn't really can't handle my moods. So
yeah, got it. Yes. Yeah. And by the way, thank you for being authentic and vulnerable. And you totally, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but this is what it's like to be human, right? We say we want things. We don't do it because the cost in the moment of switching our habit feels high. It feels annoying. I don't want to meditate right now. Who wants to do that? but we're not aware of the actual cost of not doing it, right? And so for you, it sounds like it's can cause disconnection, right, with people. It can cause relationships, right, to be harmed. And so that's really the cost, right? So like what's actually at stake, is going to get you to meditate, right? And if that doesn't matter to you, then don't do it. If it doesn't matter, don't do it. Nobody has to meditate because, oh, that makes you a new age person. You don't have to. You don't have to feel guilty. It's not an obligation. It doesn't make you a better person than anybody else. But the question to you is, is it worth it? Right? And oftentimes we think about our own little things like this as not that important. We think about our obligations to our boss as important, obligation to our family, obligation to our friends. We don't actually care about ourselves like that, right? The times that nobody else can see. So, question for you is, what is your context? What makes it worth it? If you had kids to feed, you wouldn't be like, well, I don't know, they can have dinner tomorrow. I just want to check Instagram, right? So the question for you is, how important is it that you just say, there's no way I'm skipping this. This matters. Sorry, that was the kind of answer that was much more than you bargained for, but
Yeah.
to go deeper, it's important. It's important to get to the guts of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you share a little from an entrepreneurial perspective, building this all together, forming a team, getting out there and helping people understand that this is something that adds so much value that they're supposed also to pay for it, to lie a business model behind it?
You mean, sorry, from a raising money for to investors or for end users?
Both, like the entrepreneurial journey to the topic.
Yeah, the entrepreneurial journey. It was a very. So I worked in stable jobs. I was, my first job was at Microsoft and then at Amazon. I was there for 6 years. I always thought I wanted to start a company, but I was too scared. I grew up in an Asian household where, it's like my parents wanted me to have stability more than anything else, right? They did all the right things. I went to all the right schools, worked at all the right brand name companies. And there was this fear of well, what happens if I go off the right path? What if I can never recover? And yeah, I can tell myself, oh, of course, yeah, you're smart. Your resume is still okay. If you try it, it doesn't work, you can go back, people will hire you. But the animal instinct is oh my God, I'm just going to die. I'm just going to disappear from the face of the earth. I'm going to fail, right? I don't know how many of you can relate to this, but having this vision of what your life is meant for or what you can be. And the big fear of, oh my God, what if I actually try it and I don't measure up? I'm no Steve Jobs. I'm just a normal person who's supposed to work at a big company, right? And so, those are all the forces, at play for me.
Which was Steve Jobs at a time as well.
What is that?
Which was true for Steve Jobs at a time as well, being a normal person going to university.
Yeah.
And
yeah. It's easy to be just good enough, right? It's easy to be just good enough that you can stay there forever. And be okay in everybody else's eyes. And, I had this feeling I was in some job that was good enough that everybody was like, wow, you work at Amazon? And secretly inside, I just felt kind of actually ashamed was the actual emotion, right? I knew I wasn't doing the thing that I cared about. I just did the thing that everybody else could be like, wow. Worked at RDO. I wasn't even going to join the AI chatbot startup. I wanted to change the world by then. I wanted to do something to impact personal growth because it changed my life so dramatically. And yet I joined an AI chatbot startup, and then when it was 2 years in, I was like, there's no way that the rest of my life is I'm going to work for American Express when we get acquired. I was just like, I can't, or I don't even want to stay. I had a conversation with my boss and he was like, this is a very bad financial decision to leave because, many people just wish that they could ever have the experience of joining a little startup and become a millionaire 2 years later from it. And I was like, you know what? This is not a financial decision. The world is on a day-by-day slip. People have anxiety. People have depression. People are killing themselves. People are in careers they don't care about, but too scared to leave. People are in relationships that aren't meant for them. Like all these kinds of things are happening every single day. And none of the solutions out there are good enough, right? So like, am I going to sit here collecting a bonus from American Express? I said, even if you were to write me a flat check for $1 million 12 months from now, I still can't do it. And so I left. And I did the same thing when RDO got bought by Pandora. I was like, I don't want to do it. I don't care. And I left, and so, and I can relate, like, I think a lot of people don't know what they care about enough to leave everything on the table, right? Like I spent a lot of my years, it wasn't until the last 5 years when I got really into my own personal growth that I had something that mattered to me that much. Before it was like, I want to do something good for the world. I don't know whether it's poverty, environment, this or that. There was nothing I cared about enough. But when I did personal growth and I was like, wow, this is very low hanging fruit. This is not rocket science. It just hasn't had the right combination of people to create a new solution. And I genuinely thought that I might be the best person in the world to do it. And so, it was a fairly easy decision for me to leave behind these things to do something that I cared about. Another huge influence for me starting a company was I did this course called Landmark. Have you all heard of anybody? Anyway, it's called Landmark. And it was one of the most impactful experiences I'd ever had. And, they say like, your top 2 driving forces in life are to look good or not look bad, or to be right or not be wrong, right? Like we are driven to look good and be right, like wars are fought, people are killed so that someone can look good or be right, right? And so, it's like your most prized possession is your point of view. You like hold on to it. And so, in this course, it was really interesting. I realized that my whole life was about looking good, about doing things that other people would be impressed by. I would never fail, therefore I would never look bad, and all those things. And I just gradually lived a unfulfilled life. And, I think what I learned was, wow, like in order to not look good, I became a highly analytical person. Analysis paralysis. Nobody has more ideas than I do, but nobody talks themselves out of it faster, right? And so I was like, that's the story of my life. Start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. Never actually follow through on anything. And, I was like, all right, that's enough. My life, is it going to be on my tombstone that I looked really good? Like, no. And so I went ahead, quit my job, started, and it was a very rocky path. I quit my job 3.5 years ago almost, right? And here I am having raised seed, the product is pre-launch. I'm not going to tell you guys some grand story about like Silicon Valley, this, that, and the other, that's the version you tell investors so they give you their money. But like the true story of entrepreneurship, it's like super not glamorous at all. I thought I would quit my job, like get a team, and I'm a good product manager. I'm smart. I know coaching. I'm just going to like, do the thing. Lost. I was completely lost, like for about 2 years. This idea, that idea, this idea, like no conviction. And I was so used to looking good. I was so used to working at a big company where you have an idea and people support you. Oh yeah, that makes sense, right? Startup world, you realize it's not a meritocracy of ideas. We live in what's called a agreement reality. What's true is what everyone agrees on. How do you know gravity exists? How many people actually prove that for themselves? We all say, and then all the experts say, and that's reality. We agree. Great. Is Amazon a good company to buy things at? Well, everybody seems to say so. And I'm no scientist. I haven't methodically tried everything else, but yeah, we all agree. So, starting a company, it was like, I have this idea that nobody in the world agrees with. And every single time I would shop it around, I'd tell somebody, hey, how about this idea? And they say, yeah. And I'm like, okay, I'm onto something. And then I talk to somebody else tomorrow. They're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, I'm really onto something. Talk to the third person. They're like, it'll never work because of X, Y, Z. All of a sudden I'm like, yeah, you're right. It'll never work anyway. Next. And I was this permanent habit of like shiny object after shiny object. And the first road bump that came along, I would quit. Right. So I don't know. I mean, there are some people in life who have a lot of what they call grit, a lot of persistence, a lot of follow through. I think I considered myself as a person of that category. And having quit my job, I realized I was really not. I felt like I had to give myself an organ transplant to get to where I am today, to actually be willing to look bad and willing to fail and be willing to give people an idea over and over again. And if they say no, that doesn't mean that it's a bad idea. That just means they don't get it. So yeah, I don't know. That's kind of what I have to say about the entrepreneurial journey. It's incredibly messy. It's a incredible personal growth experience. Maybe you'll be luckier than me and just do really well with some investors up front and feel really good about yourself. But like, no matter what, it's gonna tear you apart at some point in time. They call it a roller coaster, and it's absolutely true.
And I feel like a lot of people compare their chapter 1 with someone else's chapter 40, and there's no shortcut. When most of the times there's no shortcut. So walking through that mud. I guess you also heard a lot, this is not a job, get a job. That's what I heard a lot. And how can you actually explain what you're doing? So how would anyone ever pay for what you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, explaining what you're doing, that's a really interesting thing, right? I mean, part of it is your own conviction about it. You can't sell somebody on something that you're not really sure about. And believe me, I've done the lukewarm pitch to a lot of people before, where like in the background, I'm like, oh my God, I hope they never see what I'm actually like. I hope they never find out that I have no idea. Like, this is just the veneer. This is just the top layer. And if they just scratch below that, they'll realize it's all just, I'm just a monkey dancing on a stage, right? Like I've been there before, and I can tell you those pitches don't work as well. Because, humans, we have so many, we're just giant, like sensory organs, like we just like organisms, we're there to detect things, right? And so you'll never fully trust somebody who's trying to fool you. Like you'll just know, it just won't feel good, The other thing is, a little bit more tactical, like let's say you do know what you're talking about. I mean, one of the most important things that a really good friend of mine, he's a very experienced venture capitalist. When I gave him my pitch, and I wasn't pitching to him, but I was just like, here's what I've been telling investors. And he was like, here's what you have to remember. He's like, you're a product manager and you like talking about products and design and user experience. And you're also a coach. You like talking about that. He's like, that's not what your audience cares about, right? He's like, think about this. You're talking to somebody who's taking notes, right? He's taking notes based on everything that you're saying. And basically they have a set of criteria that needs to be met. Okay, if you're a B2B business, here are the traits it needs. Oh, if you're a B2C business, here are the traits it needs. Oh, you have some social network effects. Here are the traits it's looking at, right? So basically you need to fill out that form for them. So realize that you're not there to is not just like a magical art of inspiring people. No, they're a business. They're looking at characteristics of a company. And if you want to be effective with them, you know what they're looking for, so that, by the way, the next step after you pitch that investor is they have a investor meeting every week internally, where everybody pitches their what companies they talk to that week, right? And when they all sit around the table, you know, like I asked my friend, I was like, okay, so I just told you everything about my company, right? Like, how would you summarize, you know, at that weekly team meeting, like what this company is, right? After I told him like all my like brilliant ideas, who was like, I would say it's a startup in the wellness space, subscription model, some network and data effect, so some network effects, and you know, with you know, some barriers to entry around data. That's it. And I was like, what? I just told you all of this. That's what it's going to get boiled down to? It's like, yeah. I'm like, what? You know, so basically, right, you have to know what they're looking for in order to pitch effectively to them, right? They are looking for certain characteristics, and that's what allows them to then sell that upward into their company, right? So I would say, you know, two things. Definitely get yourself to the point of conviction. And sometimes it'll take a long time to be at that point of conviction. And that's just the truth of it, right? And then once you have that, make sure you know what your audience is looking for, because you might spend your whole pitch talking about things they don't care about. And they're going to ask you questions because they're not willing to say like, hey, here are the bullet points that I need to fill out, and you're not covering it. But, you know, like basically people start asking questions. They start scratching around and they're like, yeah, but what about this? And what about that? It turns out they're just basically filling out a set of stuff.
When do you
Yep, go ahead.
An investor whom you're pitching makes the decision as to whether this isn't going to be worth listening to, we just got to end this comfortably and politely? And when do you think, how far in do you think they're on the hook now? This is now about them finding any reason why not to continue.
You mean like, how would you know, like, what are the indicators that they're really into it versus not actually?
What are the indicators which you see and rely on?
Like, you know, it's interesting. Are you pitching investors yourself?
I am an investor and I also do pitch.
Got it. Hopefully any of what I just said was at least partially accurate then.
Oh yeah, totally.
So, I mean, for me, it's evolved quite a bit, right? Because initially when I was pitching, I just wanted everyone to like this. And so it was like, you know, I would take it really personally if it didn't work out. I kind of made it mean like, oh, well, I'm not a good entrepreneur. This is a bad idea, or I'm bad at pitching or whatever. And then, you know, a friend gave me a really amazing piece of advice. He was like, no, this is like a date, right? Imagine you go on a first date. You kind of know in the first 10 minutes whether you like each other, you know, and if the person doesn't like you, you don't spend the remainder of the date trying to change their mind, or at least hopefully you don't, right? And so it was like, okay. So when I'm going into a pitch with an investor, they're either into it or not, right? What this person said was they probably made up their mind roughly about like, they kind of like the idea, they kind of like you, or they don't. And then they'll spend the rest of that meeting justifying that, right? Looking for reasons to confirm that in one way or the other. And so like for me, I think if there's no initial click, like by the end of it, if I felt at any moment in time I needed to convince them, or they were like, yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but what about that? I actually, you know, even in the call, like even if it's a first call, I might just be like, sounds like this idea isn't really like matching a mental model of yours, or like, sounds like you're not really bought in. And like, I just don't even care anymore. So, I would say that like, I think for me, I stay interested in a investor as long as who I'm talking to cares. Now, let's say I'm talking to like 3 people from the same firm. First 2 people I like, third person doesn't really get it. You know, I will put in a better effort because I know there's still the other 2, right? But at the end of the day, I don't want to work with an investor who I'm like who's not actually bought into the idea because, you know, it'll be a rough ride. So I mean, I guess, you know, I decide pretty quickly whether there's a click and whether they're worth investing in. And then toward the end, like, yeah, I don't know. I just like, I like who I like, and I'll keep working with them as long as I don't get annoyed or something.
So it's not just about the money.
Yeah, no. I mean, it was in the beginning, right? Like the truth of it is like, you know, I think a lot of entrepreneurs would say, oh yeah, I want mission aligned investors. I mean, yeah, if you just have all the investors throwing money at your door, yeah, you take your pick, right? But in the very beginning, it's like, who's willing to write the first check, right? Because investors, obviously, they feel safer when other investors are involved, right? And so when nobody's involved, everybody's like looking around, it's all empty, right? And I feel like, you know, generally the method is like, whoever will write the first check, get them in. Who cares who they are? And then, you know, and then once you have a few people in, you build on top of that, things become a lot easier. And like toward the end, I became very, very selective about who I think is going to add value, who I think is actually mission aligned. You know, by then we had like celebrities wanting to invest. You know, we had like, you know, one of our LPs is like Melinda Gates and like Reid Hoffman. Yeah, but it took a long time. Took me almost 4 months to raise 1.6 million.
That's not a long time.
Is it not? Oh my God. Felt long.
So can I ask a little bit more about this app you've created? I mean, the whole coaching scene is of course very like personal one-on-one, just like you said, as you know by yourself. How do you create an app which is more like generalistic and probably a lot of code? How can it relate to personal identifying problems from people?
It's a combination of things. Like, well, I think the simplest answer is personalization, right? Like having modularized content, right? That having people fill out basically a personality assessment up front or an intake form up front, such that we know information about them, we know what to present them, and we give them some amount of choice in what paths they choose to go down. And so, you know, it's a combination of us being smart and a combination of like them self-selecting.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I really like the idea. I mean, I have an IT background, so I'm very, very like intrigued by this whole process of how to create something which is digital, based on ones and zeros and machine learning and things like that, artificial intelligence, and create it into something which is human, right?
Yeah.
In a way. So
Yeah.
I'd love to learn more about that.
Yeah. And we, you know, we started off audio only, and now we're actually moving into video as well, you know, and basically pre-recording video content that people have to respond to, right? So it's not just a one way. Like, I think one of the biggest problems in personal growth today is it's just consumption. You can kind of multitask and do other things. It's like, whatever, there's no consequence. I'm just watching a video. Oh, whoops, I didn't realize I was just thinking about something else the whole time. But, you know, when you actually require the user to give a response, you know, then I think then it dramatically changes how effective it is and how engaged and invested the user is in the experience.
And if you compare it with companies like Mindvalley, for example, which is like one of the biggest personal development companies in the world, I think, especially when looking at IT related stuff. They have a lot of online courses, right? You can have interviews, masterclasses, things like that. It's very bundled into a subject or a series of subjects. Is it combined like that, or
Yeah.
is your business model or your content model different from that?
Well, I mean, I think the business model is similar, right? We're going to have a bunch of different paths that people can go down, right? And we're going to allow people the option of a la carte as well as subscription. The product experience is drastically different, right? Like kind of like what I was saying about us not just being content and us being interactive and us including like reminders and such, right? So that you can actually reinforce new behaviors and practice them. Like that's what fundamentally doesn't exist anywhere else. Yeah. And so, you know, with Mindvalley, they're more like, I would say a traditional online course, right? Whether it's on YouTube or, you know, or it's like masterclass or something else like that. But we're kind of leaping off the page and becoming effectively an assistant in your life.
Cool.
Ian, Johan asked a question earlier. Maybe you only want to ask it by yourself.
Yeah, actually, it's probably not anymore that much into a follow-up, but I'm still quite interested, you know, in this. I mean, I see how in Europe this coaching kind of business is taking up, you know, and how do you see this in your region? Like, what type of coachings are most kind of requested by people? And like in Europe, we are now very much into health coaching. So, you know, weight loss and everything, healthcare, and then how do you perform better with, you know, your brain and cognitive abilities? And how do you translate this, you know, in the digital world? So how much in this framework that you created, because I imagine there's a back end and a front end, is automated, and how much is like, are people involved who are checking people's replies and you know, do some sort of manual work, or is like everything automated with, I don't know, natural language processing, deep learning, or these kind of things?
There's no deep learning happening. There's just me and two engineers sort of basically taping together an experience. But as far as the level of human involvement, right? I think, you know, down the road, like I'd imagine 2-3 years down the road, you know, we'll invest more in things like sentiment analysis, you know, like natural language processing. But, you know, in the near term, right, like the content is actually fully scalable without any human involvement at all. We are considering the possibility of making it feel more personal for users by every once in a while having somebody kind of like spot check what people are recording and just give a personal response, you know, like maybe, you know, as a user, you will get 2 personal responses in a month, right? It's not like we promised that to you, but at least it makes it feel like, oh, wow, someone's listening, right? The other thing is we're going to be incorporating some social aspects as well. So, you know, we're going to have people kind of hold people accountable and people witness other people's responses.
What was the name of the app again? Where can we find it? I want to try it.
Oh, you can't try it. We're not in the App Store yet. It's called Human.
Okay.
Yeah, it's tryhuman.io. But yeah, it doesn't it hopefully we'll have something out in the App Store before the end of the year.
Cool.
To your target on number of users, what do you target? What do you think are going to be the number of habituals with whom you can build this relationship?
You mean what we think is like the total addressable market?
No, because that's sort of almost everybody. But what would you be comfortable with? If an investor said, okay, so how many people are you going to go? How many people are you shooting for, you know, Q2 year 2?
Yeah. I mean, I'd be totally making up a number, but let's just call it 50 to 100,000 people by, you know, end of next year.
And if you were to characterize them, I love to use Trump or non-Trumps, but let's use a different characteristic. Are they going to be the ABC ones or the DC2s, or what sort of grouping do you think are going to?
Wait, what do you mean ABC one?
Oh, do you not have this? Okay, so I'm from London, and we tend to segment consumers.
Social demographics.
Yeah, consumer. Like high value people who can spend a lot of money. People well educated can spend a lot. People who are not educated who've got a lot of money. People who are very educated and poor.
Okay. Okay, that's really, really interesting.
But we're closer to India, so we have castes.
Yeah. I would say that, our initial audience is going to be incredibly white collar. We're starting off with professional content as the vertical that we're starting with, right? I should mention, I also own an executive coaching company. It's about a $500,000 business, and we coach over 60 people every month at Facebook. So that's my side business that I started after I quit Mezi. And so I'm very familiar with how to sell into companies, very familiar with what your like working professional at a big tech company is interested in working on and what they get out of it. So that's where we're beginning. And so we're going to start off with pretty well educated, pretty well off people, somewhere in the age range of like 25 to 40, probably. And, but, the ultimate vision, like I certainly would have no interest in building this company to just help the rich get richer and the people who have resources to get even more resources. So, when I ran my first test for this last year, it was just me recording a 3 to 4 minute talk every morning and sending it out via SMS. And, at our peak, we had over 500 people getting this every morning. And I did user interviews to learn about these users, because they weren't like 500 of my closest friends. They were like people I got from Facebook ads. And I would talk to, 21-year-old babysitter in the Midwest who, listened over breakfast, and she said nobody had ever talked to her that way before when she listened to my recordings, or another guy, or a woman who was a middle school bus driver, right? And she said she learned how to listen to her kids and not just talk down to them, because they're younger. And so, those are the stories that I can't forget, like it's easy to go to the places that make a lot of money. But yeah, so ultimately, I mean, the goal is we're creating something that's scalable and accessible for everyone, but we're starting off with wealthy people who can pay for it.
It'll be a lovely thing to sell to KPMG to put across 100,000 of their young professionals, wouldn't it?
Totally.
And just one question: do you see this app as replacing coaches, or like complementary, or would people like do both at some point? Or
I think a lot of people, a little bit of both. For people who haven't done coaching before, this might be the only experience of coaching they ever have, and they're satisfied with it. And it might be all they can afford, right? Now, I think for some of them who can't afford it, might try one-on-one coaching after that, because now we've suddenly made coaching something they have a taste of, and now they might want more. And then for people who already have coaches, I think a lot of them, honestly, there aren't that many coaches out there, but the coaches out there, it's like a bell curve. It's like any other job. They're good plumbers, bad plumbers, good engineers, bad engineers, good coaches, bad coaches. And so the majority of people are, okay, right? So I think for a lot of people, they might prefer to work with one of our world-class coaches, right? Like we have 2 coaches who used to coach Stuart Butterfield, right? The founder of Slack, that are creating content with us. So would you rather have a one-on-one interaction with someone who's okay, or would you rather have this kind of scalable thing with somebody who's really, really top-notch? So, yeah, it's kind of the answer.
Thanks.